the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice right here, right now. We're going to talk this morning with Theresa Douglas. Theresa is a fighter for America, and she is fighting for us on a couple of different fronts, not the least of which is she is an activist against Agenda 21 around the nation. And, you know, part of what she does is keep an eye on and a watch on government. And I got a call from her last night in which she talked to me about this brand new piece of legislation that's being proposed in the city of St. Louis. Now, this is of interest to me and to us because of its proximity to, and I live in the state. But I got to tell you something, folks. Most of the country doesn't realize that this kind of thing happens around, because if it doesn't happen in your city, you don't even know about it. But apparently, and wait till you hear what's going on with this. In St. Louis County, they're planning to force property owners to purchase a landlord license if you're going to rent out, or even if you're going to allow friends and family to inhabit a privately owned domicile. So now this is not somebody who's a landlord for a living. I mean, I get that. If you've got 5 apartments and you rent them out to people, that's you're a landlord. But if you are someone who wants to allow a family member, or if you're someone who wants to allow a person that you are not related to share your domicile, you're under no obligation to let the government be involved in that. Theresa, are you with us this morning?
Yes, I am. Good morning, Mike.
Thank you so much for joining with us. I'm grateful and appreciative that you decided to get on with us this morning. Thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to discuss it. It's something that we need to have people aware of, and we need to get the word out and have people attend our county council meetings to oppose this ordinance they're trying to pass.
Well, this thing has some really far-reaching implications. And more importantly, it has some extraordinary penalties associated with it, which aren't civil in nature, but are criminal. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because, I mean, you know, the right to ownership of property and the right to be unmolested in your ownership of property is one of the basic foundational stones of our constitutional principles. You know, John Adams said to us that the moment that the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the law of God, and that there is not a force of law and a public justice to protect it, anarchy and tyranny commence. And I got to admit, when I look at eminent domain, when I look at Agenda 21, where they're trying to create these massive open space areas, when I look at Agenda 21, where they're trying to shoehorn everybody into these 300 square foot apartments and all of this kind of nonsense, and now things like this, I mean, it's clear to me that there is no public justice to protect it, and there's no force of law to protect it, and anarchy and tyranny are well under commencement.
Yes, and you know, I can't even say it's about the money, because this license that they're requiring is a no-fee license. So the St. Louis County is not going to charge a fee in order to license you, and they're going to have to create a whole department to enforce it and issue licenses.
Well, one of the things the first thing that strikes me when I hear that is that they recognize that this is such an abhorrent law that they know that if they charged for it, people would really be up in arms. So if they do it and it's free, nobody will kick and scream.
Right, but what they're not, what they're trying to keep under the table is the $1,000 fee per day that you are not in compliance with the law.
I mean, $1,000 a day is beyond draconian. When we talk about that kind of a fee, for an apartment that you might, or a roommate you might charge a couple of $100 a month to share your house, or your apartment. I mean, it's insane.
And it gets worse because you don't even have to have any money changing hands. You don't even have to rent a room out or have any kind of profit. You could have a friend who is lost their job, or they're ill and they need somebody to help them, and you say, come on into my home and I'll help you out until you can get
Sure.
back on your feet or you're feeling better, and not accept any money at all, and yet you could be subject to these penalties and or go to prison.
I can't wait until the LGBT community hears about this, because they're in a unique situation in which they're legally prohibited from getting married in the state of Missouri, right?
Yes.
They cannot marry under the laws of the state of Missouri. And
Right.
since they can't marry, they would not necessarily be considered to be immediate relatives. And so they're going to be in a situation, because if they want to cohabitate, I mean, how are they going to do this without having to be under the watchful and draconian eye of some little micro tyrant with a 1-inch mustache under his nose, who's running around with a pad with everybody's name and social security and name and address on there?
And what they would have to do in that case is they would have to apply for a license, and then they would have to have the county inspectors come out and inspect your home before you can have somebody occupy space within your home.
And
So
what are they
they're going to come
inspecting
and
for?
they're going to do an inspection, and if your house does not meet inspection, you're going to have to bring it up to codes before you can allow this other individual to stay in your house for free.
So, and I'm assuming that the ADA codes will kick in here too, right? So, the disability codes, where you're required to have extra wide doors to accommodate wheelchairs or ramps and things like that. I mean, is that part of that, or is that something separate?
I don't think
Because under
that,
I
well,
believe landlords are required to meet ADA code for public housing.
You make a good point. That issue I have not heard that issue come up in the county council arguments. However, there was, and we're having strange bedfellows in the opposition on this bill, because we are
No pun intended, right?
I'm in the liberty crowd, the ones that fight for our liberty and fight against tyranny, and yet we're having the same people that we typically oppose that are also opposing it. We have the head of the Equal Opportunity Housing Authority was down there saying that it would be an undue burden for minorities and blacks and handicapped people.
Okay.
And it would essentially target poor people especially.
Right. And I can easily see that, because let's be honest. I mean, how many folks are sitting out there and saying, "Hey, I can't afford a place to live by myself, especially in a high-priced urban marketplace. But if two of us get together or three of us get together, it doesn't just have to be college roommates. How many people are roommates just because it's I'm a single person, you're a single person. We've got a 2 or a 3 bedroom unit here. Let's just split the rent, and we can all get along a little bit better."
Right. And this ordinance specifically spells out that you cannot assist anybody. In section 825.200 part 2, it says, "It shall be unlawful to assist a person or entity without a residential rental license in performing any activity prohibited by this chapter." So they come right out and they tell you this ordinance, this law would prevent you from assisting anybody.
You know what this is? This is a measure to eliminate community assisting community and force everyone into government dependency. One of the things that I saw in this as I was reading through it is that everywhere you look, the phrase "at the discretion of the administrator" is the threshold that basically says what the rules are. But when we're talking about at the discretion of the administrator, that means it's no longer an objective piece of law. It is now a subjective piece of law. And if that administrator doesn't like you or the color of the socks you wear or the way that you cut the grass in the front yard, it's all up to the discretion of the administrator. Now, and if you get a bad administrator, or even depending upon your viewpoint, a good administrator, the problem is that this is the same nonsensical empowerment that we saw when we look at the Obamacare debacle, right? Everything is up to the discretion. And discretion is not rule of law. Discretion is rule of men.
That's true. There's a second portion to this ordinance that they are trying to pass, and that's the nuisance portion of the law. And with the nuisance portion of the law, if anybody has any 3 nuisance complaints within 2 years, they will be forced out of their home. You will have, let me put it this way, the landlord will have his license revoked on that property.
So if the tenant, hold on a second, let me make sure I understand this. So the tenant themselves, if they make more than 3 nuisance reports in the course of a 2-year period, the landlord, according to this new regulation, would be required to evict that tenant for being a nuisance.
Yes. Yes.
So, all right, let me understand this now.
It goes a little further than that, Mike, because he has to have all of his properties in compliance. So if he has more than one property, all of his properties are going to have to be in compliance. He's going to have all fines paid to St. Louis County Municipal Court before he can allow any tenants in any of his properties.
Well, here's the problem with that, because it sounds to me like you're placing the landlord in a position in which he's untenably constrained by the law, and he's twisted. And here's why. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that I'm a landlord and I've got 5 rental properties. And I've got one tenant who, calls up and complains about the dog barking next door, okay? Mm-hmm. So I call over 4 times, and the police say, okay, Mike is a nuisance, you've got to kick him out. And the landlord then takes me to court and says, you have to be evicted. Now I decide I'm going to fight back against the eviction because the dog does bark next door and I've got a legitimate complaint. And I pay my rent on time and I'm not doing anything wrong. So now, here's the scenario. The landlord goes before the judge and he says, Your Honor, I'm evicting this tenant. And the tenant I stand up and I say, you can't evict me, Your Honor. I've done nothing wrong. And he says, well, I've got to evict the tenant because this law forces me to. And the judge looks at it and says, but that's not a legitimate reason under the law for you to evict a tenant. So now the landlord is caught in a situation where he cannot win. He's being forced to violate one law to meet another law.
Yes. And in order to abide by this law, he's going to have all of his tenants evicted in that interim period before he can show that he has met all of the requirements. So there are a lot of poor people who cannot afford to move again every time that one of his tenants has a nuisance issue come up.
Right. You know what it sounds like to me? Like this, like when you were in college, or when you were in, if you ever served military time, when what happens is you're told that, everybody's going to suffer for the actions of this one guy, right? So now it's up to everybody else to make sure that he complies. And, they give him a blanket party that night to make sure that he recognizes that when you're told to run 10 miles, you don't run 9.5, right?
I could see 2 things happening. If somebody doesn't like their neighbor who they know is a renter, boy, you could use it as an opportunity to get rid of them.
Oh, boy. Couldn't you ever? I mean, this to me is the height of insane and hubris, frankly, on the part of, who do these people think they are, first of all, to intrude on private property rights? What you and your landlord agree to is entirely up to you and your landlord. And there's no one that should have the wherewithal or the ability to violate those basic tenets of being an individual who's, look, if a landlord chooses to waive their rights, or you as a tenant choose to waive your rights, that's nobody's business but yours. I mean, that's a consensual civil agreement between people. There's no reason for the government to get involved and criminalize anyone's activity for any reason. I don't understand it. This whole thing is just...
It also denies them the right to earn an income from their property.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you're telling me that because I've got one tenant who I have absolutely zero control over because he's an individual, I'm not his nanny, and he makes 5 harassment calls because the neighbor is playing the music, the neighbor's 16-year-old is playing drums in the garage, right, at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, suddenly, you're telling me that because of actions of my tenant, because of the actions of someone I don't even rent to, who just happens to live next door, I've got to terminate my tenancy agreement with my other tenants and put myself out of business, pay mortgages for a bunch of places I don't have rental income from. I mean, it's insane.
It is. I mean, most of these county councilmen who support this are all Democrats. And I can't imagine what were they thinking, because this hurts everybody that they claim that they support. It hurts the poor. It hurts the handicapped. It hurts the minorities. It hurts the LGBTQ community. I mean, it hurts everybody. I mean, it will put an end to sin because it will probably eliminate fornication.
Right. You and my girlfriend, if my girlfriend and I can't live together because we're not allowed to cohabitate without a permit, right? So if I wanted my girlfriend to move into my house, that couldn't happen. If I was a girl and I wanted my boyfriend to move into my home, which I own, with no mortgage on it, then I couldn't do that without going and saying to the administrator, "Hey, I'd like a permit for my boyfriend to move in."
Right.
I mean, what if he's a racist and he says, "Yeah, but you're a black girl and he's a white guy, and I don't like the idea of interracial relationships."
Well, I kind of doubt if that would be the issue. The only exception.
Why? It's all that their discretion. It's their discretion. That's the word that's in there. Discretion.
That's true. You're right. That is in there. Now, there are 2 exemptions that they list in there. And those exemptions are if you are considered a beneficial owner. That means if you are managing that property in a trust. And then the other exception is if you are a family member within a 2nd degree of consanguinity, or however you pronounce that, but it means you're just within 2 levels of the family. So you couldn't even have a cousin stay with you without having to get a license.
Wow.
And
now in the minority community, I can see this being a major problem because, and I'm going to say why, and I know this is probably going to be unpopular, but it's the truth. There are fractured households in the minority community and in the lower income communities, irrespective of color, that are highly fractured. In other words, they're a single mother, and in many cases, you might have individuals who are related, but not within the 2 degrees of separation that they want to play the Kevin Bacon 7 degrees of separation game, right? So, in other words, you can't say, "Hey, wait a second, you're my niece or my nephew on my sister's side, and she has recently died of cancer, and I'm going to take her 2 adult children in and give them a place to stay while they clean up her affairs and get back to college."
Not without a license and an inspection and pass and bring your home up to code before you do it.
Is there any part of the word police state that someone doesn't grasp when they hear this conversation? I mean, even the Nazis didn't do this.
I think that this whole thing, it's a way to know where each and every individual is, who they are, and where they're at. Because this is a whole hidden segment of the housing market. and this will expose and make the information available to the county on where everyone is located.
Is that what you believe is the motivating factor here? Because I can't see any rational, legitimate reason. This sounds like some knee-jerk reaction from some stupid pencil neck who's actually, probably living in some vast McMansion somewhere that has no concept of how the rest of the country lives.
I have no idea where they dream these up. I can only think of one industry that would benefit from this, and that would be the hotel industry. Because there are organizations where people will trade their homes. I'm going to go to Florida and vacation for a week or two, and you can stay at my house in St. Louis.
Yes, I've seen that recently, where they offer online, and it's kind of like a finder service, right? So you can, you could come in and spend, instead of staying in a hotel, you can stay in someone's private home, kind of like a house sitter.
Right. But that's the only place I can see an advantage.
If the hotel industry is behind this, then every hotel should be shut down. Every hotel that's encouraged this should be shut down by boycott from the local community, because this is insane.
This ordinance was introduced by Councilman Mike O'Meara, and it is supported by Councilman Steve Stenger, who is running against County Executive Charlie Dooley in the next election.
We've got 2 minutes left. Let me ask you one thing here. When is this thing slated to pass, and what can people do about it?
It will be up for a vote again on May 6th. That's Tuesday. The county council meeting is located in the administration building at 41 South Central in Clayton, Missouri. That's the county seat.
Right.
And I highly encourage everybody to speak, because they don't know what you're thinking if you're just sitting in a chair. But if you want to speak, you need to sign up, and I would say be there by 5:30, because if you don't sign up, you will not speak, and you'll only have about 3 minutes in which to say what's on your mind about this.
I got you. Theresa, thank you so very much for bringing this to our attention, because I live in Missouri, and I never even heard about this. In fact, I typed it in to do a little bit of a search on it and could hardly find anything about it except on American Thinker. And so, it's not like something that they're even talking about widely. It's almost like they want to kind of keep it a secret.
St. Louis is a beta star city for ICLEI, which is the enforcement branch of the United Nations here in the United States. So, who knows?
I gotcha. Theresa, thanks so much. God bless you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mike, for helping us get the word out about this.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to America's Voice Now. We're on a hard break. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to talk about why Americans want to flee the blue states of tyranny. What do I mean by that? Well, the vast majority of the blue states, these are the states up along the two coasts, not the flyover states, and Illinois, which has got Chicago in it. Those are the blue states. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is such a problem and why so many Americans want to flee them but can't. Hello? You're listening to America's Voice Now. Make sure you visit our website, and we'll put up some links about how you can contact these knuckleheads up in St. Louis. We'll be right back.